filled with information. Where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime! Woo!
March means March Madness to a lot of people, but it is also Women's History Month. Today, we give the guys a day off and have an all-female show where we talk about financial challenges that are often unique to women.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
Welcome in this morning to the Get Ready for the Future show, and it is an all-ladies show. This is a very unique event at Gen Wealth, but today we also have a guest with us. So in studio, I'm Janet Walker. We have Teresa Arago and Candace Stanley. We are all in Central Arkansas locations, so tell your specific locations.
So I'm from Conway, the Conway office.
And I'm in Bryant.
Okay. And so I've spread out across the Central Arkansas area here. And joining us from Greenville, South Carolina, we have a new friend in the industry. We have found that we have very kindred spirits. This is Karen Oeser. Karen is the author of Mind of Gold, A Girlfriend's Guide to Financial Freedom. Karen, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it is our pleasure. Absolutely. It's always good to find a kindred spirit, for sure. Karen, we know that you really have a long history in the investment world. Tell us a little bit about your history and about financial literacy for her, kind of what sparked your passion for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I was in the traditional investment business for about 25 years. I worked, as an analyst on the fixed income side. I started out on the equity side. I also manage an emerging markets fund. I lived in Switzerland and London managing assets there, and I came back stateside and I started working for a wealth manager in Washington State, and I managed over $150 million worth of fixed income assets there. And what was happening is we had so many women coming into our offices that were heartbroken because they were at the end of their careers and realized that they didn't have enough money to retire, or they were going through some life event, whether it's a divorce or a spouse passing. And they didn't even know where to start. And I just thought, I saw this pattern. I said, no more, I've got to do something about this. And so I have a partner with financial literacy for her, and her name's Erica Neal. And she's also worked in the insurance space, and she was seeing the same thing happening in that space. And so we came together and we decided we wanted to create a safe space for women to come and learn about money in a place where they can ask any question. No question is stupid. And then we'd come together and partner with financial advisors and insurance companies and lawyers and accountants, because we're all a team.
Yes,
and so a lot of times if you haven't had an opportunity to really work with anybody in that whole team environment, you don't understand that everybody needs to work together and they all need to be on the same page. And so we wanted to be that person that can help advise them in terms of launching into their financial retirement, financial questions, as well as to work with people like you. So once we get their mindsets in order, we can send them to you to actually put it to work.
That's awesome. I love hearing your passion. I actually got goosebumps because a lot of why I'm sitting in this chair is because I saw some gaps in my own knowledge and thought, man, if I could train just one person quicker than I did, they'll be even further ahead. What do you think is the biggest obstacle or barrier to entry that women face when it comes to investing in their financial futures?
Well, it's really the fear of not knowing where to begin, I really think, because, there's a recent article I read that said 80% of women are afraid to talk about money. 75% of them are afraid to talk to a financial advisor. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. You see that every day in what you do. And so I think that becomes the biggest barrier. And so that's why if you have a way to connect with them, and also a lot of it is mindset issues. A lot of people start with, whether their parents fought about money and they made a vow, I don't want to ever talk about money, or they've seen somebody not do something unkind with money or hurt somebody, so they end up not wanting to hang on to their money. So a lot of getting underneath those mindset issues and why you're afraid of money is really that's what we spend a lot of time doing, and that's really the big barrier to get over.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. And as women, we naturally end up in a caregiver role, whether it be for our children or our parents or someone else. How do you think that might impede or benefit a female investor?
Well, I'll speak to the benefit first. The benefit is that women, we have an ability to multitask and think about a lot of different aspects all at once. And so a lot of times the men will think in a very narrow way and just think about, maybe my family or something. But women have the ability to, once they've been empowered of what they need to think about, all these different items, they actually can do the algorithms in their head and follow you when you're talking to them. Whereas sometimes, the men have a struggle with that a little bit more, if we're being frank. And so I think that's a real benefit. The where it impedes is the fact is two ways. One is that you don't have time. You're too busy caregiving. And the other one, it's very expensive. Caregiving is very expensive, and without having a plan with how to pay for that, and also not even knowing again, all the things, with the estate planning, everything that goes along with that, it's very, very important. And, as we know, the good news is the earlier you start attacking that, the faster you can get on top of it. And then you don't have to worry. You can go back to caregiving.
Yes.
Sure.
Karen, you really hit on a key point there that we focus on really with all of our clients, and that is planning. You talked about, if you don't have a plan, then things kind of go awry if you're just not prepared for it. Before you can get a plan, though, we believe that education is very important, and we spend a lot of time educating our clients, male and female. We're talking specifically about ladies today, but we spend a significant amount of time educating, and I believe this is really something that, ladies, we don't get this in the school system. It doesn't matter if you've got a doctorate, unless it's in this area, you really don't get educated about money. And Karen, I've got to tell you, thank you, by the way, for breaking some glass ceilings, I'm sure, in your career, because a lot of the things that you talked about, there was a time period, and you were there during part of this, when you just didn't hear about women doing those things. And I do have to tell you, the probably one of my favorite things that is not like we get to make a difference in people's lives, but a favorite trivial thing about this, being a female in this industry, there is never a line at the ladies' room when we go to conferences and all of that.
True.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It's the opposite.
I was, a couple of years ago, I was at this big conference, and there were 64 people in this room, and there were 3 women.
Yeah, I do that often. I just kind of scan the room and go, okay. Yeah,
It's the only large gathering we get to go to
That's
where
right.
the women's restroom
That's
is
right.
easy to access. You're right.
So-
When we started, we were the one. There was only one of us, and now we're up to 3.
That's awesome. So on to more important things like financial education. So if people are listening out there today, how do our listeners get a copy of your book?
Yes, we have a book called, as you said at the top of the show, Mind of Gold: A Girlfriend's Guide to Financial Freedom. You can buy that on Amazon. You can buy it directly, or you can buy it on our website at finliteracyforher.com. And we also have a financial planning workbook that is really dovetails very nicely with the book, because what we do is we talk about budgeting, we talk about credit, and we actually have action steps that you can do with each one. And so the workbook gives you a chance to put it into practice. So then when they come into your office, they've already thought about these things, and you're able to talk about having a specific plan. And then we also have online courses, and it covers all the subject matter. One of the things that's very important, as I've mentioned, is the importance of mindset. So the way we structured the book is that we talk about what's my purpose, what are my value systems, what are my excuses, what are my money blocks, and then we go into budgeting, credit, investing, retirement, and taxation. And so you get a chance to practice that out. So when you walk into your accountant's office or your lawyer's office, you know that when they're talking about something, you've already been exposed to it. We have a chapter called Asset Classes Defined. And it's basically a glossary on the terms you're going to hear when you walk into your financial advisor.
That's
That's awesome.
fantastic.
That's fabulous.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that fear is what keeps a lot of women from taking that
Yep.
step. So if
Yeah.
they have that guide, that just gives them a little bit more confidence to take that next step and come into the meeting room.
Karen, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And again, to our listeners, you can get her book, Mind of Gold, A Girlfriend's Guide to Financial Freedom, on Amazon. And you can get in touch more and learn a lot more through her other materials at finliteracyforher.com. Karen, thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, ladies, I have to tell you, it was an interesting conversation at my house when we started talking about having this topic on the show, women in finance. My husband looked at me and went, honey, I mean, no offense, but money's money.
Money doesn't know if you're a male or a female.
That's right. That's and he is correct. So I want to be very clear. I am the biggest tomboy you've ever known, and I'm not all about, well, we're girls and we have to have a special meeting for girls who do this. Like, those things kind of drive me nuts.
Yes.
But there really are some points that in general are true of women more so than of men with regard to money. And the example I used with my husband is, okay, statistically, who takes more time off work to be with the kids, to raise the kids? So therefore, they're going to have a lower Social Security check. And if there is a pension, they're not going to have as much of a pension. They don't have as much opportunity to put money back. Who statistically lives longer? And therefore, they have to plan for their care. And so he was like, oh, okay. Like that.
When
that
you look
does
at
make
just the
sense.
data, there are patterns that you see that tend to lean a certain way for women. So
Right.
we're just talking about those and educating our listeners about some things they can do in light of those.
Right, right. So one of the things that we have found, and Karen talked about this a little bit, that many times women are kind of intimidated to come in and talk about money, and that is somewhat generational. Like, I think the younger generation is not as timid about that as the older group. So we see that quite a bit. But what here at GenWealth, it's good for you to know, we actually have 5 out of 14 advisors at GenWealth are females. And so we meet with a lot of widows.
Yes, and one thing that I think is really important when you're talking about the next generation and where this industry is going is that people have role models. And it's interesting that I'm doing this show with Janet, because Janet is one of those people that has been a role model for me since I was a teenager. So I would never have thought of being a financial advisor had I not already met Janet and been, around her and then worked for her in a different role. So I think it's really cool that people out there are getting to see, hey, there are companies out here who are stepping outside of the typical and seeing the value of having females on their team. And I just love that GenWealth is that way.
Yeah, and we've even seen some clients, when they call to schedule their appointment, request a female now because they feel more comfortable, or maybe the spouse, the wife, feels a little bit more comfortable having a female in the room. It just brings down that comfort level, you know.
And one of the things that we try to do, we're not always able to do this, but we try to have, as teams, a male and female advisor. Obviously, with 14 advisors and 5 of us female, we can't have all of the groups divided like that. But ideally, when that's possible, we do, because frankly, you're meeting in most cases with a husband and wife.
Yes.
And each of them are going to identify a little bit more comfortably with one of the genders. And so, again, it's not always possible, but we try to do that when it is possible. So this has been, as far as financial planning for women, it's often been thought of as kind of a niche market, but we just really don't see it that way here at GenWealth.
No, I mean, women make up over half of the population. And when you look at the data, they control $22 trillion, which is half of the wealth in the United States. So even though it's considered a niche, it's really not a minority by any stretch.
And I think us as, us 3 being financial advisors, we definitely don't see it that way because we're financially minded. And so sometimes it even is not surprising, I guess a little bit surprising, where we've got a fearful woman coming in, in this day and age. I met with some clients a few weeks ago, and it was like pulling teeth to get the financial information from the wife. And she just said, listen, we were not raised that way.
Yeah.
We were not raised to talk about money. And so, I just did my best to make her feel as comfortable as possible so that we could kind of get to the same point that, that was really their goal.
Yes.
I'll go back to the classic Dave Ramsey line on that. He says, our parents didn't talk about money and they didn't talk about sex, so we thought they had neither, and it turns out they had both.
Yes.
So the reality is we do talk about money. Frankly, if you go to Scripture, there are more verses, more references to money than any other topic. And I think, frankly, the Lord knew we were going to struggle with it, and we needed to have an education about it. And so we talk about money very freely and very openly. And the reality is, when you're coming in and meeting with an advisor, they need to understand your situation so that they can help guide you in a way that is unique for you. And they can't do that unless you're willing to share that information.
We said just a minute ago that 22 trillion in the U.S. is controlled by females. And there was a research study done by Fidelity. By 2030, they estimate that 2/3 of the nation's wealth will be managed by women in some facet because of organic growth, but also intergenerational and spousal transfers. Women tend to live longer, so they're going to end up with their family's nest egg at some point, typically. So it's really important that they be involved in the planning process and that they understand what's going on financially too, so that they can manage that for the next generation or for themselves.
Yeah, if we're meeting with a husband and he hasn't brought in his wife, and that's fine for the initial meeting.
Get started.
Yeah, just to get started. But we are always encouraging to bring your spouse as well. If something were to happen to the husband, she needs to know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that life expectancy a little bit, because that is very important. We'll do a little bit of a stereotypical example here, and again, it's not always this way, but we do see often where the guy has more money for retirement because he's worked more years and maybe had a higher paying job than what the wife did, or maybe the wife didn't work outside the home at all and so didn't have an earned income over those years. And so sometimes they both feel like it's his decision on what to do with his money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to remember that that money has to be utilized for the household. So while it is his money that he earned at work, her staying home with the children allowed him to go do that. And when they get into retirement, one of them's going to die first. And statistically, it is the guy who goes first. And on average, women live 4 to 5 years longer than men. So you got a longer time horizon to plan for. But here's the deal. This is a big deal. Those who are married, on average, outlive their husbands by approximately 14 years. That is a game changer, and that is why the female in the marriage, even if a dime of the money doesn't have her name on it at that point, she really needs to be involved in understanding the plan that is put together, because at some point it is highly likely that these dollars are going to be in her hands to control.
And can we also talk about how the plan needs to account for what happens when one of them's gone? Whether she goes first or he does, we know the statistics. If your plan doesn't include covering that when the spouse is left alone, then it's not a plan. It's not really a good plan.
Right. Yeah. We absolutely have to be sure that we're addressing that. Let's talk about the potential for lower earnings for a female. Many times we see that. We talked when Karen was on the show with us about the glass ceiling, and here at GenWealth, there's not a difference, particularly for advisors. There's not a difference, period. But for advisors, if you're at this level, you're at this level. And I don't care what the gender is. That's where you are, and that's what you're earning. In anything that is sales-based, that's ultimately how that looks. And I hate to even use the word sales. That kind of has a bad feeling to a lot of people in the industry. We are educators first, but in order to implement the plan, you ultimately need some type of product, and that involves sales. And so for the advisors, there's really no difference in how they're compensated, but across the country in different job areas, we do still see a difference many times in compensation, and that plays into the plan for them.
Yes, and it affects a lot of different pieces. It affects their ability to save for retirement. It affects their Social Security benefits when they reach retirement. Because one of the big pieces about Social Security is they need 35 years, basically, of records to create your benefit, to maximize your benefit. So if you've got zeros in there because you chose to stay home, which is a phenomenal thing, we are not knocking that at all. I did it. Candace did it. All of us have done it. So, but if you've got zeros in there, that will negatively affect your ultimate benefit. So it does have an impact, great one over time.
Yeah, and that's actually for my husband, oddly, it's unusual, but due to health reasons, he became the stay-at-home parent for a good number of years. So he will not have 35 years of earnings. So there will be some zeros that get factored in for him. So again, we're kind of talking in generalities where it's usually true of the female, but it could be the husband as well.
Yeah, I mean, several of us have stayed home and taken care of our children while our husbands worked. And just particularly for my family, we're seeing that transition. So this may, someone out there may be experiencing the same thing. My husband's in the military, and he's about to retire in his early 40s. You know,
but what does retirement mean for him? Does it mean go to the house and twiddle his thumbs?
Well, he thinks so for just a little bit, but no, he would never want to just stay home but he's talked about maybe being a stay-at-home dad and just being more involved in the kid's life. So that may happen. We'll just have to see. But we're seeing this transition in our home where I didn't make a lot in the early years of our marriage, and he was the breadwinner, and now we're seeing that transition. And so now I'm going to have to make sure that we are still continuing to save for his retirement, even though he's actually stepping out of the workforce. So there are all sorts of different situations that walk through the door, and we'll just address them. It doesn't need to be something that you fear.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you think about those pay imbalances that happen over time, we're in a similar situation too, where for me to have the freedom to do this job well, my husband chose to take a little bit of a step back for the purposes of supporting my career.
Right.
So that happens a lot. But ultimately, I think, you've got to think of your finances as a whole, because if you're not both working towards that goal together, if there's not a plan that is combining that at some point, then it may be missing the mark for you long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about a lot of the areas where it might be a unique challenge for females as compared to most of the guys. But realistically, ladies, it is all, again, about that household and their individualized plan. And when I say individualized in this case, I don't mean like for him or for her, but for their household.
Yes.
They get a plan that is unique to them, because the reality is no two people have the same background financially, or the same future needs, or the same set of assets, etc. Every family that we have walk in the doors of a Gen Wealth office has a different story, a different past story, and a different future story. And so as we are helping them get ready for the future and helping them prepare for retirement and then go through retirement, then we need to go through that process and determine what is specific for them, what is their unique circumstance, and how do we put that plan together for that couple.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot on recent episodes because it's been a big deal about inflation. And you think about, we said women tend to live longer, up to 14 years longer on average. So you think about that plan, and you've got now one Social Security check's going to drop off when that single, when they become a widow or a widower. And now you've got more expenses to cover through your assets. So if women are living longer and outliving their spouses, we have to anticipate increased lifetime living expenses, including medical costs, because at this point now they may not have a caregiver inside the home, assisted living or nursing home expenses possibly. Even though women tend to be tasked with caring for others, there may be a time where they need others to care for them. So does the plan cover that? Is your plan ready for that?
This was a very unique circumstance with my parents. It normally does not happen this way, but when my dad passed away, and obviously his Social Security check stopped, my mom was a teacher, so she continues to have a Social Security check and a teacher pension from the state of Arkansas. But Dad's Social Security check was gone, and Mom was thinking, okay, I'm going to have less income, and I'm going to need to really pay attention to cash flow for the first few months and kind of figure out what things look like. Well, it wound up that in spite of Dad's check being gone, Mom actually was able to save more money. Now, Dad wasn't spending money.
I was
on
gonna ask.
anything. No, I mean, my dad was still wearing the same shirt that somebody bought for him 30 years before, and that's not a jab, that's gospel truth right there. But so he wasn't spending money on anything except medical needs. So the point was, he had so many medical expenses above and beyond, what Medicare and everything was going to cover. They were paying for those things through cash flow. And then when his Social Security check went away, his medical expenses also went away. And Mom has been blessed thus far to be very healthy. And so her expenses are actually way lower, even though the income is lower. So, but that is not often what we see, ladies.
Yeah, and I've been meeting with some clients lately too. They keep asking about, well, I want more income in the early years because I want to enjoy my retirement, and I don't need as much income later. So I'd like you to take some of that you have planned for me later and put it in the beginning of the plan. And we just have to say, yep, I know exactly what you're saying. We don't want to sacrifice any of your fun in retirement, but let's talk about buying power.
Yeah.
And the fact that you might have some increased medical expenses later. If you don't, fantastic. You've got some extra money there. But if you do, we have got to plan for it. So we've got to plan for inflation later in those years. So in our clients' plans, when they see that their income is higher, like in the 15th and 20th years of their retirement, it's really the same money that they've kind of started with as far as buying power goes.
Yeah, and it's kind of a teeter-totter effect that happens over your retirement years. So yes, your medical expenses are lower, but you've got a lot of activities that you're doing in those go-go years that we call them. But as you go, those two kind of trade off, where your medical expenses are increasing, but you're not necessarily traveling as much. So even though you're not doing as much, you still need additional income later on to offset those expenses that weren't there when you were younger and able to kind of go more.
And again, inflation is an ever-present topic these days, but it's certainly something you need to plan for in retirement. So we're talking about some key areas that are unique for women many times, not necessarily just for women, but many times unique to them, talking about a longer life expectancy and the impact that has on your financial situation, along with the potential for lower earnings in many cases, increased expenses in retirement. So now, ladies, let's shift and talk about the solution on this. How do we address some of these potential risks? And I'd like to start out by talking about in Karen Oeser's book that we were talking about earlier, she makes several points really that we would agree with her on. One of those is to understand and modify your financial behavior, and to do that early, to not wait until you're at the precipice of retirement. And ladies, I don't think that financial behavior is something that we talk about even as much as we talk about all these other like more educational, just black and white topics of finance, that a mutual fund is this and investing means this. Those types of things, we certainly don't spend much time on financial behavior. I
think we do within the Talking Sense podcast a little more than we do here, because when you're trying to help people understand where you win, it truly is mindset. And I love that Karen mentioned that they spend so much time focusing on the mindset first, because if the why is big enough, the how works itself out. And what I think of here is that lifestyle inflation. So, I get a new job, or I get a raise. Yay, I can afford this. No, pause. Take a minute to think about your goals before you go and do that. We were talking just this morning with a client, and he knows a kid who just graduated. He and his wife both graduated medical school, so they've got these nice paying jobs coming up. And first thing they do is go buy a big house, buy big cars, buy a boat. And it was just like, the opportunity. The opportunity to pay that debt off in that first year. If they had just left their lifestyle the same for 1 year, they could have paid all of their debt off and then start fresh. And so that mindset is so important, and understanding that it's the little things. It's just like weight gain or weight loss when you're trying to make healthy choices. It's not about big choices. It's about the daily, momentary, do I eat the good food? Do I eat the food that looks tasty? Sometimes they're the same. Often they're not. Let's be real. Do I exercise today or do I not? Those little steps when your financial choices also are huge. Do you have a budget? Do you not?
Karen talks a lot about mindset, like you said, and gratitude. And I love that she added those elements to her guide. But she also talks about having that positive self-talk. So a lot of us women sometimes will struggle with negative self-talk, but if you can start and to modify your behavior about finances. Think about, I think she mentioned, every night at bedtime, have this positive conversation with yourself that, no, I'm not bad at money. I'm good at money. I enjoy paying my bills. Things like that. That's going to start to change that behavior when you start to have that positive self-talk. And I appreciated that she added that.
Henry Ford quote. I know you got it in your head.
Go ahead.
Is if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Janet gives this quote a lot, and I've used it with my kids a lot, so I can't get mad at her for it. I love it, but it's true. Another thing she talks about is avoiding common financial traps by educating yourself. And the thing that I love about her having this book out there and us getting the opportunity to get to know her a little bit is there's a lot of information on the internet. There is not a lot of wisdom. And knowing that you have a good resource is so important. So finding people like her who have the heart of an educator, like our team, who have the heart of an educator, I think that's so huge because then you'd find the wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to circle back to what Candace was talking about negative self-talk. I want to give you a small word, but a very powerful word, and that is the word yet. So instead of saying, I'm not good with money, I'm not good with money yet, or I don't understand this, I don't understand this yet, and give your, I know that sounds silly, I get it, but there is so much power in that so that you can then shift your mindset and go, but all I need to do is learn about it.
Yes.
And then it puts you in a completely different place.
I was talking with my hairdresser one day. I'm going to see her later. Shout out
This
to
is
Jessica.
a girl show. Talking to my hairdresser.
Yes. But, years ago when I first started going to see her and I told her about what I did, it was like, no. I don't, you are a special person to be able to want to do that, is kind of things she would tell me. And about a few months into visiting with her, I showed up one day and she said, Candace, I bought a book about financial planning and I read it. And I couldn't put it down. And I read it cover to cover. And I was just amazed by all the things that I learned. And I realized that an IRA is not an investment. It's just an account. And I mean,
she's right.
Yeah, I know. I was just cheering for her. But you could see where before I would never talk about this stuff to where she was ready to talk and was excited about it. And I just thought that was so cool.
And that empowerment
Just
is
that
the thing I love most about our job.
Just the education is just a little bit of it really is all it takes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is something that we take very seriously here at Gen Wealth is our responsibility to educate. So when people come in and meet with an advisor, whatever your stage of life is, we're going to spend some time educating. And beyond that, ladies, we really want to look at taking actionable steps. And so that education has to lead to action because otherwise, yes, knowledge is power, but power doesn't mean anything unless you use it.
Yes, your financial journey may feel like you're trying to eat an elephant. So our job is to give you the bites that you can handle now and pause you on the things you need to wait on. So that actionable steps with a time-bound goal are really critical to this. And then also knowing the importance of investing. To build wealth specifically, when I was getting licensed, my niece, bless her, Caitlin, she sat and listened to me go, oh, I can't believe I didn't know this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, over and over and over again. I'm just going to be honest. I was just so frustrated that I had not been taught these things. And it had an impact on her, though, because she saw the importance of it and how frustrated I was. And she started at 18. I've found out since then that you can start sooner, but, had I known that then, we could have done it. But she understands the impact. She got used to that money coming out of her bank account every month so young that it's like it's not even there anymore.
Right.
She doesn't even think about it. It's just part of her finances. And, y'all, she is going to be so ahead of the game later on with just this small start that she had.
Absolutely.
Well, that was pretty perfect timing
Wow,
there,
good
Teresa.
job, Teresa.
All right. It comes from sitting in John's seat, right?
Sure.
All right.
It's his karma coming in.
That's right. Okay, so we are at the 2-minute final bell. So final thoughts. Candace, we'll go ahead and start with you.
All right. Doesn't matter if you are male or female. It is always best to have a plan on paper on purpose.
And we talked about 3 important things women should consider, and this is really everybody, but longer life expectancy, potential for lower earnings, increased expenses in retirement. So the solution here, bottom line, don't just hope things work out. Plan for it.
there really are some differences, and as my husband and I talked about, the show, as I said earlier, he started kind of head nodding and going, okay, yeah, longer life expectancy, probability of lower earnings through the years, whether it's from staying home or just because your job pays you less than what your husband is earning. We see it happen many times, but the solution is to get a plan in place for you, a plan that's based on education, and just spend some time learning. You can do that here. You don't have to come in already knowing those things, but be sure that you educate yourself. Take the time to get that education in place. Without a plan, the future just happens to you. We don't want to be in that situation. We've got 10 ways to shift your perspective of financial planning for free. Text PLAN, P-L-A-N, text PLAN, or visit getreadyforthefuture.com/plan to get your copy. So you can do that. The text number is 501-381-5228. Just text the word PLAN to get your copy of 10 ways to shift your perspective of financial planning for free. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we will be back next week. Not all three of us. We're actually going to let the guys come back in next week. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com. Or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.